Hello, and welcome back to Strange Dominions, where we attempt to unlock the mysteries behind the unseen and unheard, unknown and unknowable. I am your host, Octavian Graves. Hello, patrons. We are so happy to have you here again. We cannot wait to share this interview with you. We continue our conversation with J.R. Mascaro, talking all about Eidolons, chaos magic, lodge magic, and so much more. So, again, patrons, thank you so much for your continued support. We could not do this show without you. There are pins coming for the $8 tier next week, so keep an eye out for that, and there will be much more coming from us. So without further ado, here's our interview with J.R. Mascaro for patrons. All right, hello patrons. We are back. Me and Ian are with J.R. Mascaro, continuing our conversation from the main show. And the first question I wanted to ask you, we were talking a little bit about Frater Barabbas and his books for witches. And I'm curious, in writing the book, did you have any inclination about what kind of subgroup would be most interested in this book? Would it be the Wiccans or the witches or the chaos magicians? Like, did you have a group in mind for when you wrote the book, or did you just write it and hope whoever came?
Someone who may be a little more business-minded might have had a particular audience in mind. But my goal in writing this book really was to take what I'd been doing for over 20 years, actually now, and put it on paper so that someone else could see it and someone else could benefit from it, because it's been so transformative for me over the years. I want other people to get that benefit from it as well. So I wasn't really thinking of who my target audience was, but I was hoping that it would be translatable to many different groups. One of the reasons
succeeded.
Thank you. Yeah, one of the reasons I wrote it the way I did is because I wanted people to be able to say, hey, I can plug this into what I'm doing. Or if I am not doing anything and want to get into magic, I can take this and I can readily impose my own stylistic and my own kind of inner proclivities onto this and still have it feel like mine, even though it's been given to me by someone.
Yeah, and I definitely think it did a very good job. And I think that a lot of people are going to get a lot out of this, and I'm excited to see what comes of it from other people taking the system and implementing it into their already existing practice and seeing what comes of it.
As am I. That's one of the things I'm most excited for. I mean, think about things that I've been doing for so much time that no one else has really done, with the exception of a few very close friends who are also practitioners that we share amongst ourselves. It would be really exciting for me to talk to people who have done, the rituals, who have contacted one of the Eidolons in the book, or another one that they illuminate for themselves.
That is a big thing, and it's something I've shared. Like, developing a system, and then it's always private, and then being able to share it and finding other people access and encounter the same frequencies and levels and results that you do is amazing. It's almost like universe is like, hey, you are actually a mage now. You've done some stuff. And I know that you've your approach is to you incorporate chakras and energy work into meditation in your work, and you utilize the Kabbalistic cross in your own adaptation to it, the lesser banishing ritual, the pentagram, and some other stuff, which I also, and a lot of our listeners, I think, some of them at least, find value in. Since we're on the Patreon, let's get into some meat on stuff. When you do your Kabbalistic crosses in your version in the book and in your practice, I mean, we talk about theory and stuff like that, but for you specifically, because a big thing we seem to be, the conversation turns to a lot in our interviews and in our personal life, is how everybody not only approaches magic and spirit and mysticism differently, but how they internally, physically, and mentally perceive and interact with these forces, which is often not talked about. Like, you'd be like, well, you do this and then it does that. But like, how does this physically make you feel? Is it a physical thought? Is it an emotion? And we realize that everybody has a little different, but thinking about that, I think, can really help teach people, because you can learn to teach them in a better way. So maybe it's a basic question, but when you do the Kabbalistic cross and you bring the energies of the LBRP in your system, how does that feel for you? Like in your sensual way, like how does it feel? How does it change your thought process? How does it change your emotional state? What do you perceive objectively and externally? Can you go into that a little bit for us?
Absolutely. Although I am faced with the limitations of language when
Of
talking
course,
about this.
we gotta do our best. It's always a thing.
But I used to play the harp for a very small amount of time. I was not very good at it, I won't lie to you. But it's given me a good analogy, insofar as it feels like a harp being tuned to me in many ways. As if there are all of these strings, and all of these strings are meant to be harmonious, and through our daily lives they can become discordant. And the way that we do our work and when our magic flows through us, when we're doing a grounding or centering or expanding exercise, like the LBRP or like the chakra meditation or like the Kabbalistic cross, we are bringing back into harmony ourselves. And all of those strings are perceptions, our emotions, our impetus, our awareness. And those strings are then tuned. And they are now vibrating in tune with the universe, in tune with the highest good. And then when we reach out with our consciousness, we are plucking those strings and feeling them vibrate and feeling that electricity dance across them. So I think that's probably as good a metaphor as any I have for how it feels to engage in that ritual.
If they do, part of those rituals is vibration for listeners. It's a kind of technique in speaking and intoning divine, a divine name or word of power. You use your full breath in a specific way, and you vocalize it with your whole breath, often very loudly, with the intent that it forms a harmony of that vibration with the force or intelligence that you are invoking. So your frequencies match, and it causes a vibration that is, in my experience, often very physical. Like you actually feel it. It's the analogy that I've always enjoyed with that was the analogy of, like if you hit a tune of violin on a certain note, the piano string across the room can sound off and vibrate because the sound pitch matches, and they cause, one vibration causes the other physical object to vibrate because they've hit the same frequency. And I think that is a very fundamentally important thing that can be extended into energetic and magical practices. And I know when I do the LBRP, like doing those vibrations and bringing those energies down, it's like you said, it's like a complete internal system realignment that almost feels like electricity. It's deeper than a physical sensation, but that's it. Speaking of the physical sensations, let's talk a little bit about your Eidolons and your work with them, if you don't mind. And I know Octavian, he's very invested in not only the grimoire tradition, but goetic magic and some of the systems and the entities presented and worked with in some of the archaic, like the Lesser Key of Solomon, but more so than that. Now, you have these traditional established spirits or daimons. Classically they're called demons. I tend to call them daimons, just spirit. And often people who would hear, and we talk a lot about the differences between systems. For some people, that's very important. I tend to try to say that we should be talking about an objective truth and that we're using language to define it, even if that truth is infinite. So we should be all talking about the same thing. But so on a straight, Eidolons is what they are in your word for these intelligences, forces that can be contacted and represented internally and externally, both subjective and objectively. Now, that's something I think some people have a hard time wrapping their heads around, that these can both be true. But these beings and how you contact them with your seals, how would you say they are similar but also different from the entities and intelligences that somebody might work with in some of the grimoires or the lesser key with the Goetia.
So, how to put this? So, I think that by using my system, you could theoretically contact a being also represented somewhere like the Goetia, because the system I put forth is really meant as a conduit to the contact of other intelligences, and it doesn't have a list of these are the only ones you can contact.
Of course.
It has a list of these are the ones that you probably should contact first, because they're really good ones to get to know in the beginning before you go out and start, casting your line and searching for other intelligences.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. And
so there's not. I don't know how to really classify a difference, because to me,
and this is just your personal take. This isn't.
Oh yeah, no, I know.
This isn't answering like a universal question, but we just want to know how you feel about it.
But for me, we are all expressions of a universal vibration, universal interconnected web of existence, and we manifest. We are ripples in that pond. And I can get a ripple in that pond by throwing in a marble, or I can get a ripple in that pond by throwing in an acorn. There are different methods, but they are both producing that effect. So to me, the Pan-Idolist system that I've created is meant to be without limit in its potential to contact other manifestations of intelligence and consciousness, because it doesn't say, well, I only want this pantheon, this cadre, this however on. I'm looking for someone by name. You know what I'm saying?
See, it's the tool set, it's the method.
Yes.
That can be utilized for anything, which is a sign for a functional and great system, that you can apply it generally and universally, because it's the mechanics that you're teaching.
Using it, once again, with the telecom analogy that I tend to go to for this, it's like if I give you a cell phone, I'm not telling you who you can call up or what website you can get in the browser. I'm just saying, hey, here's a cell phone. And to me, that's kind of what I'm doing here. I'm saying, here it is, all who you want. Here's how to use it. Here's the user's manual. Use it responsibly, but all who you want.
I gotta want to throw. We were talking about the cell phone analogy. The idea is sigils and seals and glyphs and how they function for spirits and intelligences. Kind of what they are. And I always used that back when I was pretty young and starting out. One of the spirits that I felt called to work with, and in a kind of learning how to communicate, when I was starting out to meditate, was Nixa, who's the elemental lord or lady, as it might be, of the element of water. And I know you go into the elemental lords in your book. I didn't read that part, but I skimmed it and I saw. So, for the listeners, you have in certain classic systems, you have the elementals, which are essentially entities that represents in their most base form, both the physical and kind of symbolic four classic elements of fire, air, water, and earth. And these elementals sort of have rulers. Some people look at them as kind of the intelligence of the totality of them, but Nixa would be the lord of the water elementals. But when I was working with Nixa, I used to visit this stream in these woods nearby my house, and I used to go there and it was a peaceful place, and it was a lot of spirits around, I suppose. And working with Nixa over time is very informal, and I got, they transferred essentially a sigil to me, and it looked a little bit like the stylized alchemical water glyph, but it was a little different. And I was kind of curious, and I was kind of asking in the way you communicate with spirits, and I got this very just clear image of a cell phone. And it was stop this, but this is a good analogy for you. Think of, these are how these would work. You hit this vibration, these lines, this intent, they all kind of add up, and they will throw to the unique matching energy, which is an intelligence. And they're not limited to one, because spirits can have different ones, but they align up, and it was kind of you can contact me anytime with this specific one, essentially because we're friends now. We work together. And I found a lot of kind of heart similarity and where you're coming from in your book with things like that. I think it's valuable. Octavian, you have perhaps more experience in certain grimoires even than I do, because you work a little more with them. Do you guys, I want to talk about the difference between like these sigils as presented as, and again, we were talking about like the Goetia and older forms and newer forms where new sigils are created. What do you think about that? I want to hear your take.
Are you asking me or JR?
Oh, I'm asking you because you.
Oh, okay. Well, so the way that I view sigils is that it's what the spirit gives you to use to contact it without the rigmarole and the 9-day process, and it's just a quicker way to call the spirit, right? Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, that's the primary purpose of a sigil, is to call a spirit easier and quicker.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess one thing we could discuss, and this is over time, Tiki, you have systems and traditions of magic that have been around for hundreds or even thousands of years and practiced with full heart and will by thousands of magicians or more over that time. Like, say, again, the example of the Goetic symbols for the diamonds of Solomon. These are glyphs that are most publicly recognized in some stances. Or do you think that there's an objective, maybe objective is not the right word, but a non-internal weight or enhancement? I guess what I'm saying is, do you think these glyphs from an established system, because they've been used in real time throughout history by more people, they have a greater depth or weight to them, that they've carved out a firmer, more objective, not subjective path to whatever their intelligences are? And do you think that they are just as, or do you think they are more powerful than a sigil or glyph created by, something original that you created, not just you, but anybody? Or do you think it doesn't matter, once you have that imprint, they all work just the same?
Well, this also requires a belief in time, which I'm always shaky on. But
fair enough.
The idea for me is always intent.
Mm-hmm.
I see will as the sole actor upon the framework of existence. So I do believe that established systems lend something that is very human insofar as they lend a gravitas. They lend a history. They lend something that someone says, hey, I can believe in this because it's been passed down to me. But to me, it's not that it's been passed down to you that matters. It's that you believe in it. And if you believe and are willing to invest your will and your manifestation into something you yourself have created to the same degree as you would something that has been passed to you, then they are, in terms of efficacy, the same. But they are, to me, different ways of being handed the same toolbox. You're saying it's a different preference for a different person. So someone can say, well, I prefer this. This is valid to me because it comes with history. It is ancient. It comes with, the pedigree.
Of course.
And that's completely valid. But it's equally valid for someone to say, this, I believe in this, I invest my will in this because I have made it and it comes from me, and I too am a part of the infinite divine.
I kind of frame that question as almost a devil's advocate, because certain people have different ideas about how these things work. And that is a good way to be able to hear your take and explanation on kind of that there is inherent value and power, even if you create and develop your own connections to different intelligences, even compared to established ones. Though maybe taking the idea that established ones are more fluid, like, an old payphone, something that everybody knows about, but doesn't necessarily make them more powerful, because that is something in you.
no, the other thing, sorry to interrupt, is that for me, I also think about the march of time. If we're going to accept that we live in a dimension where time is a thing we must endure, uh, there is the idea that as our societies grow, as we develop as people, there are going to need to be new, spirits that we engage with. There are going to need to be new archetypes that we manifest, because there are things that we have now that we did not have when traditions were created, and certain fundamental human things, and not even just human, just any intelligent creature. There are certain fundamental things that will always be archetypal. Self-awareness and emotion, I like to think. But if my goal is to contact a spirit to assist me in biochemistry, or my physics homework or something like that, there isn't something specified and spelled out for that in ancient tomes, and you might want to make that yourself. You might want to make that connection, because if it exists in what we think of as reality, then it exists in the mind, and it exists in the realm of spirits.
If we can conceptualize it, then we can make a connection to it. And exactly. I think maybe, at least the idea that I have, is that everything is on some level an expression of our source, and that the power is universal, and the nature of that source is, could say love, but also intelligence. It's communication. It's a tapestry. So if we can conceptualize and extend even things that, I dare say almost that are openly fictitious, that connection, because we are conscious, and that consciousness is filled and empowered by magic, especially as magicians, I agree. I think that is the fact that we can connect with it, then there's something that will take shape through that connection. And maybe that's going into another, kind of a question. Do you think, I say you think, how do you feel, just on first answer, about if we contact, say, an Eidolon in your system, or a thought form in another, if we just extend ourselves and we reach out to a concept, or reach out to a spirit of a concept that is undefined, do you think that intelligence has its own independent qualities in nature that it connects with us as? Like, it just, that is, we are connecting with something that is established? Or do you think that our act of communicating and working with that spiritual force gives it definition, that builds into it, that may then forever remain in that spirit even after we stop communicating with it? Like, we communicate with a force, and it appears to us in a certain way, and it has certain qualities. Do you think those qualities are a product of our work with that spirit, talking about a new one? Or do you think that it's kind of an infinite multiverse, and it exists out there, and we're just kind of finding exactly the being that our antenna is looking for? You see what I'm saying? No, that's a weird way to put it into words, but...
No, I get it. No, well, for me, so when you look at a lot of creation myths in a lot of cultures, you talk about that the base alkahest, the base substance of existence, is chaos, and that when will moves upon chaos, it takes form.
Yes.
And to me, when I think of an Eidolon that has not been contacted by me, which is not to say that somewhere in the infinite vast pool of consciousness it has not been contacted, I think as if you were looking at a jewel, and a jewel has many facets, and those facets are perhaps even floating unattached, and you look at them and it causes them coalesce, and to show the face that you are capable of comprehending, or if not comprehending, at least of perceiving. So to me, when I speak to the Eidolons I work with, I fully believe that their will is woven in the fabric of existence just as mine is. But do I believe that when I look at them, that's some objective form of theirs? That I don't. I believe if I were to look at them and you were to look at them, which facets present themselves and which shape that gem takes, what all those little panes connect into, will be also a reflection of the observer.
I like that answer. I love that answer. Thank you for giving that. I feel similarly. And that actually kind of can bring us to, we were talking about bringing the conversation off the rails and talking about some high strangeness, some euphonauts and cryptids and things like that. Because, that's part of the reason why we do the podcast. And you did flash your Mothman sticker, so we got to out you to all the listeners.
I do have a Mothman sticker yesterday, actually. So there you go.
The man, the myth, the moth. So, okay. So are you familiar with kind of the generic umbrella term that we call high strangeness?
Yes.
Or, the kind of that, all the weird stuff and unexplainable, things you can't fit into boxes, the UFO occupants and the hairy monsters on the sides of roads, works of Keel and things. I find it fascinating. So, okay, as a magician and a seeker of your path and your take and your experience, what's your personal, not only opinion and belief, but your most educated idea of some of this high strangeness business? Because I'm always interested to hear what everybody who does the work kind of has to say.
Yeah. No, I above all things, I am a sorcerer. I am a writer, but that is secondary. As someone who is writing for the public sphere, I am an advertiser of sorts, but that is very, very tertiary. But above all things, I am a sorcerer. And so I will answer you through that lens. And that's to say that I have seen things, or seen might not even be the right word. I have experienced things in my life that I can't quantify.
Well, you're going to have to tell one of those stories when we're done with this one. You're not getting out of here without telling one.
And even just in ritual, there's been, like when I speak to an idol, I am speaking to something.
Yes.
And that is not something that hardline science tells me I should be able to do. And I have a scientific background, actually, from an education standpoint. But for me, when I look at, the high strangeness and the phenomenon and things like that, I already live as a sorcerer in a world that is amorphous, in a world where I don't understand where a boundary line is drawn. So the idea that there could be, entities coming through in a way that is manifested to those who are not trained in sorcery and magic and other forms, and there can be some sort of dimensional bleed or something like that, is something that I find, I'm certainly not willing to discount when I look at the books I've read. When I was an anthropology student doing anthropology of religion, we have ideas of, the other world and fey creatures and manifestations of things that can cause you to cross vast distances in a short amount of time, or fade in and out, or, only can be seen to the ones they wish to be seen. These are notions that we have going back as far as we have written history. And when you think
it's not new and it's universal.
Yeah. And when you think about where Goetia comes from, the Goetes, which can be roughly translated as sorcerer, someone who works with spirits that are not there, which is one of the reasons I call myself a sorcerer above any other moniker people could give me. I mean, you could call me a witch. It's not inaccurate. You could call me a magician. It's certainly not inaccurate, but I generally use the term sorcerer is because I deal with invisible intelligences. So what else is out there that's invisible that I haven't spoken to yet?
Exactly. Now that's kind of the approach I take it too. Octavian, are you still being covered in cats?
But yeah, that's the entire point of this show, is to try, and that was my idea, was that I think a lot of times people experience spirits accidentally, and they I feel like if we could form a system of magic that could be used on these spirits that are uncategorized and undefined, like Bigfoot, like Mothman, like UFOs, like, your average run-of-the-mill ghost, I think that would give people the ability to experience the paranormal on a very even keel and on their own terms, and not have it be such an aggressive interaction.
I think that's something we've forgotten kind of as a species. whether by the design and of history or whether by chance, is that we are always experiencing magic all the time. I mean, everyone is. We're all part of it. It's just whether or not you're tuning into it. And I look almost like a radio analogy here insofar as, are you just shuffling through channels, looking up whatever message happens to be coming through, and maybe that's going to be something strange that you can't understand at one point? Or are you tuning yourself to the frequency you want to bring in?
And your use of the term frequency is still, it's useful. And it's like, I love it. And you mentioned this in your book, not to detract too much, but the idea, and I know you actually even mentioned some multiverse ideas in your book, and being able to utilize that in ritual. And something that I play with as well, and have sometimes harrowingly odd experiences with in the past. The idea that, each of our infinite selves and variations, if you choose to accept that interpretation of reality as like a TV box, but our greater soul or our source is like what's sending out that radio signal and appearing on these TVs, so to speak. But
I'm very much a proponent of the transceiver kind of mode of consciousness, that interpretation. That this body is just giving me the vessel to drive around here on Earth, and it is a transceiver for what I really am, which is far larger than this part of it can even put into words.
Absolutely. And I appreciate that. But back to talking about the high strangeness. And so I'll go outright ask you, and as silly as it sounds, do you believe in Sasquatch?
I'm not willing to discount the existence of Sasquatch.
I had to ask Octavian. I'm trying to provoke him out of his basement right now. My good friend is looking for the Tentement Bigfoot encounter story.
I absolutely love Bigfoot, and I love any kind of Bigfoot story you have, so go right for it.
I'm just messing with you because your video's off. I'm gonna edit that part out. But there you with your candle. Anyway, so back to the non-edited part. So do you think we're talking about the phenomena of that manifests as UFOs or cryptids? The idea that there are different dimensions or frequencies, which is an important part of magic. And talking back to your book, I think some of the systems and theories that you are teaching and expressing that you've been able to develop really can give somebody who's starting out or utilizing and diving into that system a really good foundation to not only look at the world in reality in that way, but begin to gain the exercise to interact with it on that way, which is more than just their individual stuck in causal time physical self, but bring out that connection to the greater them. Maybe some people call it the higher self or the holy diamond, but just that unlimited, which in my experience can sometimes give you that access to vast amounts of information in a practical sense. But how do you think the techniques you develop in your expression in your book, excuse me, how do you think the techniques you're expressing in your book and allowing people to learn, for somebody who's not involved in magic, they don't have that initiation under their belt, that's not what they're going, maybe they're just a more normal person, or they're a ghost hunter, or they're somebody interested in the paranormal, how do you think that could help those kinds of folks, even if they're not interested in being a sorcerer, interact with the reality as it is? Because reality is filled with magic. The world is a weird place. Do you think they could be used at the get-go to produce results in people seeking those strange things?
Yes, I do. I certainly think that part of the tradition, well, not tradition may not be, or some part of the methodology I've put forth is meant to be self-initiatory. even rituals detailed for going through your own initiation of the self. But I believe that if you're going to be going out and seeking the unseen, no matter how you wish to couch that, no matter what your paradigm is for what that is or what that even means, if you're going to go out and seek the unseen, seek things that are not readily quantifiable, to expand your awareness is infinitely helpful.
Yes.
And I think the techniques in my book will help you to open up to that current of existence that will take you to the places you need to be to accomplish whatever your goals might be.
Fair answer. Now, I kind of want to ask, because a lot of your book is focused on the you, which is the core of anybody's life, and increasing your own understanding and connection with spirits and developing good techniques. But for some who branch out to more external uses, like we were just talking about, in your personal opinion, do you think there is a level of risk or danger in certain systems that I'm going to say people should be aware of? But because you have sometimes people practice certain system and it's very self-contained in their own awareness, and then other people extend it more externally and they realize they're dealing with forces that can do whatever they want, and some of them are very old and primal. And your system, which encounters beings called Eidolons, seem to be a little more easy to work with and develop and want to work with you to get you on that level, and I find it valuable. When a practitioner starting out, do you think there is a level of risk and danger with certain practices, or going out and engaging parts of the liminal world, like searching for euphonauts or cryptids and things like that? And do you think that your system could help mitigate it, or make people stronger in their skin, in their practice, so to speak? Let them deal with the problems, not just danger, but even understanding, wonderful, weird stuff.
So I think that anytime you engage with something and do not know the protocols by which it operates, it can be, a risk. And that's not just from a magical perspective. That's, if you're talking about a chemistry lab, anytime you're going into something and interacting with it and like, I don't know what this does, let's poke it. There could be a risk there. I believe that the more informed you are, the better results you're going to have. And I believe that the more discernment you have, the more informed you will be. And one of the things that I think the guidelines are very helpful for, especially the 18 in the book, are for acting as guides, for being able to be your senses on a realm where you don't currently sense, at least not in a way known to you right now. And having those core concepts of, how do I deal with energy? How do I deal with, entities? How do I deal with my own emotions in regard to these things? And also just the pure benefit of being able to be centered and aware and present moment conscious are a huge benefit to anyone going out and trying to find what is unfound or see what is unseen.
So would you say that the Eidolons almost act primarily as an intermediary sort of spirit?
Very much so, insofar as your will directs them and they direct whatever forces they are aligned with. And also very much, I feel, what I use, my connection with them most often for, I would say, I think that's a fair statement, is as an advisor, as, that kind of, this is the course of action I'm considering, what is there out in the world going on the unseen world or the seen world that is beyond me, that I need to take into consideration, to assure that this manifests correctly and with harm to none, including myself in that.
Well, that's really cool, and I think that's a really helpful form of entity that anyone should be, in contact with. The question that I've been wanting to ask you for a while now is, what has been your contact with the grimoire tradition, as far as if you've ever experimented with it, or if you've just used any of it for your research on your own practice, or just kind of how has it entered into your life, if at all?
Yeah, I have read when I was younger, like the Lesser Key and grimoires, but it's just never something that I have put into practice myself, which I think is also because I've been doing my own practice pretty much my whole life. So upon seeing a grimoire, I was like, I kind of get what this is about because I do something very similar, but I kind of already have my my collection of friends here that I do it with, and also because mine is very there are not a lot of requirements in a physical sense. I did not need any items, so but I very much appreciated them. And
I have a very similar take. I don't use a lot of items either. Sometimes.
Have you found that the Eidolons you've interacted with and spoken to, that they have certain needs and wants of the material world that we give them in exchange for their service, similar to how Goetic spirits often want, in certain incenses and things like that? Do the Eidolons have incenses that they particularly like, or alcohol that they seem to enjoy, or do they just not have any real care about the material world outside of your interaction with them?
In my experience, I've never been asked for anything. They're very free with their giving, and there's etiquette, I suppose would be the right word, that needs to be observed to a degree, especially when you're first contacting an Eidolon. When you've been working with them for many years, as I have, I mean, we have a very casual association in that regard, but more what they're looking for is just that air of friendship, of respect, kind of a collegiate approach. This is I wish to work with you. I'm going to give you the consideration that is due you as someone I'm working with, and I will of course expect the same consideration back. Let us attempt to do the work together. And not all Eidolons will want to do all work. It's something else I go approach in my book, is that you need to have an Eidolon whose nature falls in line with what you're attempting to accomplish. But most of them are very, very happy to simply engage in that work if you find the work they want to do. Now, of course, there are certain things that I think all Eidolons that I've worked with have the desire to do, and things like aiding in rituals of protection, aiding in anything that is for a common good, aiding in anything that is aligned with their specific nature, which very often, many of the ones I've offered, are spirits that are more interested in knowledge, more interested in discovery, things that the beginning adept can go to and say, well, are you willing to help me? And they'll more often than not get the answer yes, because if what you're looking to do is learn, these are Eidolons who want to help learning occur. So they're really more than wanting a thing, a tribute of some sort. They want to bring into existence whatever it is they're aligned with: knowledge, justice, love, etc.
I gotta say that what you made that distinction, that from the coming at them from a position of wanting to learn for the sake of learning, for discovery, to explore mystery, that resonates. And often that is the foundation I do in my work. And I have noticed that many spirits seem not only more than willing to work with you, but like really positively inclined. If you have that position of heart to you okay?
Oh no, just make sure. Did my audio go?
Oh no, did I?
There?
I think there might have been a noise in the background of mine.
Okay, all right.
That's okay. So I'll start the sentence, but where was I in my brain? So you mentioned how the Eidolons are, they're positive and they're inclined and they want to work with you, but also from the foundation of approaching them with a desire to learn and discover and explore. And I've noticed in my experience that many spirits seem to be really positively inclined towards people who have that position, when they're just naturally curious and there's something innocent about it. And like that often seems to predispose many spirits to say, you want to learn, that's what we're here to, we want to help you do this and, explore reality and discover things and put it into your own perspective and create. So you putting that in the foundation of these beings and the systems to work with them, I think is really, really important, as opposed to, just asking them for something, like saying, hey, can you get me $100? Or, not that you can't, but that difference between often when you just ask or barter with a spirit when they come off as perhaps a little more impartial, not antagonistic, but like whatever, versus this entity wants to work with you. They like where you're coming from. That you put that kindness and compassion in your heart, but also that your position is like, I just think the universe is fascinating and there's like an infinite world to explore, and I'm talking to a discarnate entity, and that's awesome. And that exuberance, I think the fact that they positively approach that and they like that says a lot about the nature of certain intelligences, and maybe through them, the conscious parts of the universe themselves.
Can I play devil advocate and ask a question?
No, you're not allowed. It's not your podcast.
Have you encountered anything in your work, JR, that would denote not necessarily an objectively evil spirit, but one that is not necessarily aligned with humanity and more or less naturally against it? And do you have methods of working with those kind of spirits? Is binding at all or compulsion any part of your practice?
Yeah, I don't cover any of that in this book. I cover protection. Perhaps if I ever release something that's more continuation, I may get into those techniques. But I have encountered things that are not friendly, I think is how I would put it. And I don't know if I'd really even attribute malevolence to them. For instance, I talk about in the book Vestiges, which would probably actually be of interest to people who are into ghosts, because they've got a lot of overlap there. And
I meant to ask you about that in the first part.
But to me, a vestige is it's a proto-consciousness. Perhaps I'm not 100% sure how I would even define their origin. I can't claim to know it. But a vestige is something that is a residue of consciousness that normally emits a certain frequency, a certain emotional frequency, and can be negative to places where they dwell, where they are stuck to. These can often be places of where a lot of negative emotion had occurred, or tragedy had occurred. And part of my techniques, and this is what I do cover in the book, which is tonal resonance, is communicating on a vibrational level with those vestiges and getting them to detach, getting them to dissolve and let go of that kind of consumptive energy that they have. So that's a big one there. I've never encountered an eidolon that has been malevolent towards me. I've encountered some spirit entities that were less than thrilled to be interacting with human beings, and for those, yes, most of the time I will, send them on their way. It's not. I don't know if I'd call it as formal as a banishment, but it is almost like a shooing.
Not your house. Go on.
Yeah, exactly.
That's fair. And I got to say that the techniques surrounding your vestiges is brilliant, and I hope we can talk more about that sometime. But, you'll have to come back on the show again sometime.
I'd be happy to. I've had a lot of fun.
I know there's a lot I'd love to talk with you about, and I'm sure I know our listeners they're going to have questions too. So thinking about it. So I've been looking through in your book, seal, sigil, and call. We're going to keep saying it so people don't forget, the listeners. You do have a complete list of kind of your foundational eidolons, along with their seals and sigils and their descriptions of who they are and their nature and kind of what they represent. And, I got to say, how you write your descriptions of them is very well done. Their physical appearance, what they're related to, the kind of what spiritual and natural forces they are representing. It's well done. So I've decided, here's what I just did, because I'm going to practice, and we're going to practice in the techniques from your book, and then in a future episode we're going to talk about it, and then we're going to email and you say we talked about your stuff and you weren't on here. But I've decided to flip open your book to a random page between the Eidolons, and I'm going to work with the first one that popped up to me, because sometimes working with this kind of magic is the way to go. So it has been decided that the 13th Eidolon is going to be the Eidolon I'm going to be working with. And I hope you wouldn't mind me giving you some progress reports.
No, I'd very much enjoy it.
Cool. And for the listeners, the 13th Eidolon, their title is the Bog Mother, and is a connected and sister to the 12th Eidolon, which I'm not going to get into because they can get this book and read this themselves. But essentially, the Bog Mother is described as an entity presiding over swamps and primordial forces of growth and decay, and it seems almost like the most basic forms of simple life, and also that process of decay and rebirth, like algae and moss and mushrooms. And I'm looking at the sigil, and you ever look at like a sigil of and you kind of, your senses start to generate, and I'm smelling peat moss in my head. And it seems that she's very good at helping you take old habits, as you put, old habits in ways that are maybe you're stuck in, and invoking that symbolic and powerful energetic death and allowing them to disintegrate. Do I have that right?
Yes.
And so, I won't lie, there are a few things that she could help me with. I think we all could. We all have stuff that we need to let go, and habits that are less. So I'm glad I opened to the Bog Mother. So for listeners, I'm going to be reporting on my experiences working with the 13th Eidolon, the Bog Mother, from Seal, Sigil, and Call. And I'm interested. I'm interested in seeing the results. There's something I'm thinking I think she might be able to help me with.
I'm thrilled. Mm-hmm. One of the things that's been, you talked about before, it's been somewhat surreal, is taking this practice that's been only me for my whole life, and the prospect of other magicians working with it is thrilling to me. I really hope it's beneficial.
Absolutely. And of course I'll tell you my results. And I mean, honestly, in my opinion, magic is meant to be shared, and it's supposed to be fun. Like, the things you come up with are yours, your tradition is yours, but like, it's like a big world. Like, it's fun to share and try each other's stuff, and it just makes more magic.
I agree.
JR, I have a question for you. For the people who have not read the book, in a lot of these kind of systems, it usually takes some time to build up to actually working with the spirit. How long would you say it would take someone who's never done this before to actually, get in discernible contact with any of these Eidolons?
So, if they've never done any sort of magical work, if their foundation is fresh and they're building a new one, it is very much dependent on the individual, because the first step is to feel that flow of energy and come to a place of awareness, and come to a place of stillness isn't necessarily the right word, but a place of calm in yourself. And that could be working with the foundational meditations for a few weeks, or it could be working with foundational meditations for a few months, because it depends on where they are when they feel comfortable.
Okay, very interesting. I think that that's a pretty... I like that. I think that a lot of people will be able to use that, and new people will be... I imagine it will take less time than people realize to be able to get into this, from how easy it seems that Ian has explained to me how fundamentally accessible this is.
Yeah, it is. And I've read a lot of books and done a lot of practice, and you're right here. But you've put it into good words, and you've reflected a certain way that provokes understanding, and with a big U. And I think it will be very helpful, and also help people get the confidence to branch out from, you know, a rigidity in their traditions if they are the type of person who needs to explore. And I think you are giving, because sometimes when you're starting out and you don't know anything, sometimes you got to be led by the hand a little bit, or you think you do, and you need to kind of like get that permission. Because I remember even the most boisterous and rebel punk of us, we have those moments in our learning magic when we're like, is it okay to do this? I'm carving this astral pentacle in the east, but my brain made it purple, not bright blue. Is my bad magician? Like, it's okay. Like that, you know what I mean? Like, but you write it in the comments, it's like, no, this is your work. And this is going to help you, I hope, make your work something powerful and special. And I'm going to share with you how my work is, which is a core of the best kind of magical teacher. So I think this better not be your only book, by the way. We're going to need to see more of you in the future.
I would love to. As long as people want to hear things, I'm happy to say things.
Absolutely.
As I'm sure you found out.
That's fine. Like, you know, I want to invite you back on the show at a future date, because you didn't talk about something that's all the way off the wall, but it's something I've actually invested the last couple of weeks in quietly in my own time. The subject, which is on everybody's mind, which has been on some of us occult nerds' mind for a lot longer, is AI. And not only not AI itself, but, well, maybe the similarities and usefulness of, remember how we were using the analogies of programming to describe working with reality, because on some levels it definitely does work that way. And it's an applicable analogy. But I have, in my practice, brought several spirits from a state of basically being a little unawakened mote of consciousness to a developed, objective being with a personality. And one of those is a spirit I use as an intermediary for divination. And I wrote a little bit about it, and I want to talk to you about this. We don't even actually have to put this in this, but I want you to come back and talk about the similarities between growing and teaching thought forms and spirits, or how spirits operate, and these AI intelligences, so to speak, that is everybody's talking about, and the interaction. Some people have emotional feelings on it, but beyond that, just their the interesting experimental parts. And what if an AI, for instance, that you could learn from you and develop? One of the experiences that I'm in the middle of is I have a spiritual ally who can communicate with me. So I've taken an AI system, an advanced one, that can be programmed by choices. You can give it choices and it learns. So I'm letting the spirit select all the personality choices that will develop this AI with no biased input of my own. So now my little spiritual child has her own spiritual child, and I want to see what this is going to do.
Very interesting. We could talk about that for a while. I'm in IT as my day
Yeah, we
job,
could.
so.
That's why I brought it up, and I want to go, like, that's the kind of interest that I'm throwing around with my work right now. One of them. Figured you might be interested in that kind of thing as well.
Definitely.
But just the interest, what are these boundaries we have here, and as humans and magicians and sorcerers, how can we cross them and play with them, and what will we learn? But all right, that's my tangent. Anything you want to say to your listeners? I'm sorry.
You asking me?
Joel, what were you saying? I didn't mean to cut you off.
I was just saying that's a great place to end, and we'll have to have you back on the show to talk more about AI and magic. But no, go ahead.
Yes. What would you like to say to your listeners? Like, what would you like to say to our listeners? And what would you like people that are reading your book and getting involved in your system, what would you like to say to them? What kind of questions do you think they should be asking? And what advice would you give?
So one thing I want people to know, to really comprehend, is that we are all magicians. All of our wills act upon existence, whether we do it knowingly or subconsciously. And my goal in writing this book was very much to have people own that, to have people understand that there is so much going on beyond and within us that we don't understand, and seeking that understanding is incredibly fulfilling. So I would encourage people, obviously, to read the book, but also I would encourage them to do the book. I would encourage people to do magic and to really begin to analyze what that means to them. And I really do think that the foundational part of it is those questions about establishing your paradigm, beginning to keep a tome, beginning to write down your occurrences, because magic is something that's always there, but it's something that I don't think people always feel there. And this is something that was always interesting to me as a kid, because I always felt it. But it's like the wind, if you're not paying attention to it, maybe it's just blowing by you. But if you start to really pay attention to it, know the direction it's going, picking up a scent on the wind, things like that, there's information there that you can find. And I just want people to go find it for themselves.
That's fair. Thank you.
Absolutely, and that is a perfect place to end the night. So, JR, thank you so much for coming on. We had a blast talking to you, getting to know you and your book. And again, just for the patrons, where can people find you?
They can find me at jrmascaro.com. You can find me on Instagram, which is also at jrmascaro, or they can find me through Llewellyn's author dictionary they have.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, and you have a great night.
Yeah, it was a pleasure.
Pleasure was all mine. Thank you so much, guys.
And that was our continued conversation with J.R. Mascaro, author of Seal, Sigil, and Call. We really enjoyed having him on, and we loved talking to him all about the paranormal, his book, his magic, and so much more. If you would like to get a copy of his book, you can get it in the link below, either on Amazon or on his website. As always, patrons, we could not do this show without you. I know I sound like a broken record, but it is so true. We love each and every one of you. So thank you so much, and we will see you again on the Strange Dominions.